Hello, everyone. Welcome to Candid, where we talk to everyday people about their relationship struggles, what they learned, and most importantly, how they moved forward. My name is Emmi Fortin. I am a breakup and relationship coach. And today I have here with me Tanja, who is a master life strategist. Hello, Tanja. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm excited.
I'm sure people are intrigued just by hearing your title and want to hear more. And you are going to share with us today a little bit about your story. And I have a quote here that you said. It's kind of a heavy hitting one. And I think a lot of people will relate to it. It says, once you find your soulmate and it doesn't work, what then? That is heavy hitting.
Absolutely, right? Yeah, indeed. So, did you want me to say what a master life strategist does to start with?
Sure,
So
yeah,
people
if you'd
are
like
like
to. And then you
wondering.
can give us a little background into like that whole statement.
Absolutely. So, master life strategist means that basically coaching people on life, love, and money. In fact, I've impacted 82,000 people in 16 countries in my career. So, just means I talk about a lot of different things during my day. so, and yeah, that quote, yeah, that's kind of interesting, right? I spent most of my life knowing that there was this very specific man out there. In fact, when I was 12, I used to write about him in my diary. And my best friend reminded me of that. I knew what he looked like, how he sat, the jewelry he wore, like I knew him. And when Johnny Depp first hit the scene, I was like, holy crap, it's Johnny Depp. But the reality is, Johnny Depp was too short because this man was over 6 foot. And so the search continued. I've had lots of love and relationships, but never had committed, even if I'd gotten married. There was always this idea that this person was out there. Well, when I was 48 years old, I was interviewing people for a team member for my work. And I walked across the Starbucks parking lot and I went, holy crap, there he is. He was sitting right there, Johnny Depp lookalike, 6'2". And I walked up to him and I had sunglasses on and I said, oh, you need to see my eyes, right? And I flipped my glasses up. I don't even know why I did that. And he looked up at me and he looked down. And I put my glass down. I sat down beside him and we started talking. And his voice, how he sat, the rings he was wearing, everything, it was right there. And I thought, oh my God, it's him. Well, as it turns out, he comes to work for me and we continue talking and everything. And he goes, I drew your eyes when I was 16 in my diary.
What?
Right. So this is a story of perfect compatibility on all the different levels. So sexual chemistry, sexual compatibility. He was my tech to my creation and product creation and websites. He had the tech stuff down. We both played chess, Chinese checkers, sailed. I mean, every single thing that you could go, values, everything, it all lined up. And we were smitten within moments because we'd known who we were forever. And so inevitably we were like, within a few months, we were moved in together and it was just like, this was it. Sex was perfect. Everything was perfect. Everything was great, all except he had been sexually molested as an infant.
Wow.
And had severe childhood trauma. Didn't trust anybody to work on that, which is interesting because that is actually one of my specialties is sexual trauma healing. And so there were things that would show up in the intense, like freak out moments of when he got overwhelmed. And so that was really traumatic on our relationship because even though I knew it had nothing to do with me or us, those moments of total rage and freaking out and throwing shit around were horrifying. And
Yeah.
probably even more so because everything else was so incredibly perfect. So it's like, all right. So we
Like it's
had,
coming out of left field, right? You're like,
right,
what
yeah,
do
here's
I do with this?
everything's cool and whatever. In fact, the first one happened when he had been taking a nap on the couch and I woke him up and he just went ballistic. And he's raging, like literally, walking me backwards as he's raging, spit flying out of his mouth, whatever. And I'm thinking, what the actual hell, dude? Now, I have a martial arts background and stuff, so I'm not one of those people that's typically scared of things like that. But I took a step back because I thought, am I going to have to deck you? Like, really, is it going to come to that? And he backed up and walked out the door. And I was like, whoa. So it settled down. We talked about it later. I'm like, what is up with that? And he goes, I've always been that way. And so, it comes back to this sexual trauma at an infant age, pre-verbal. So when people are traumatized pre-verbal, they don't have words for the trauma. They have reactions to the trauma.
Because it's like wired physically in their body,
Somatically,
right?
somatically imbued in your cells and your nervous system, you react instead of respond. So, okay, so we know this is an issue, and he's going to be, yeah.
Question before you move on. I'm curious. Did he voice this trauma to you prior to having this?
No.
These outbursts? Okay,
No.
so you had like literally no idea what was going on.
No, I just was like, wow, this is psycho. This is like, and because I deal with people in trauma, because I understand that, I realized when it was happening, it was a reaction. And I could see the difference, like behind his eyes, there's a thing that people do when they're disassociated.
Okay.
And it's like the behind the scenes person is looking at you like, oh my God, while the reaction person is like this rage freak out kind of thing. And I told him when after that happened, I'm gonna have to think about this, right? I mean, like this is a pretty big deal. So knowing that people change, I make my living on the fact people change if they have the right help.
Yeah.
It was all about him saying, hey, no, I want the help. I didn't. And he actually signed up for my coaching programs behind the scenes as a client. And so he was committed to his healing and believed that I was one of the few people that could help him heal. So we go on, the story goes on, the good, the bad, these awesome times, and then these horrific freakouts. They're clearly taking a toll on both of us, him for the guilt and shame that he feels when it happens, me for, even though I get it intellectually, my body doesn't get it, right? So having to come back after something like that and kind of like, retrust, put it back together, right? So this stuff was going on through this epic other journey of clearly we were meant to be together, clearly all this, clearly we, found each other, but we both laughed and we said, we both thought about the fact that we knew each other was there and we finally found each other, but neither one of us had thought about what happens after we find each other. So we used to joke about that because it's like, this is not what I would have had in mind. Right. So finally, it came to a head 7 years in when his dad died, and we found out all sorts of things about his dad, who had also been sexually molested, who had stolen his inheritance, stolen his house, stolen all this stuff from him. And everybody kept saying what a great guy the dad was when we went down there to the funeral. Oh, your dad was such a great guy. Oh, your dad was such a great guy. Well, he wasn't. And he'd created lots of problems and lots of them. So my partner lost it. Just that was like the straw that broke the camel's back. He'd been doing really great. Things were getting better and better. And that just took everything down. And the thing about people's nervous system is if they get relief doesn't mean they're healed. So there's a lot of ways along with your healing your trauma and nervous system. But so by the end of that year, it was so bad. Things were so bad. He was acting out in ways that just were not there. And he said to me one day as he was losing it and throwing things around the house, I can't leave you. You have to leave me. And so that was it. So that was back in 2017 at my birthday, which is about this time of year because my birthday was on October 23rd, that it all came to a devastating end.
Now, did you decide, like at some point, when people decide to end a relationship or decide to leave, like there's something that's just kind of like a deal breaker. And so for you, was it that you didn't feel safe anymore, or that you had kind of given up hope or the notion that you would be able to put things back together, or like what was?
My daughter. If it had just been me, we might still be there because, if I want to put myself in that kind of drama, that's one thing. But he knew that. And so what he did was in a freak out, walked down the hallway to my daughter's door. Now, I didn't think she was going to be in physical pain, but he was making a clear statement that I'm out of control and this isn't happening. And we would talk about the fact that he was like, I don't know how you can trust me. In the times that wasn't happening, right? How do you trust me again? How do I repair any of this? How does this even possible? But the thing about it is you can't And I don't suggest, I told my daughter the same thing. You never have to be in this kind of relationship. You should never be in this kind of relationship. If I make the decision to be in one, in this, because I believe in healing, because we're all working through this, that's one thing. But so many people fool themselves about what that takes out of you, what that actually does to you, even if you logically understand. And I never once said, oh, because I love him. Yes, I loved him. But you know what? Love isn't the reason to stay with somebody. It never is the reason to stay with somebody if other things are bad. So that never came out of my mouth. I'm staying because I love him. That's like I tell people, don't say that. But he went down the hallway towards my daughter's door. My daughter heard him coming. She opened the door. She stood him down, and she was only, what was she at that age? I think she was 14, and closed the door in his face. And of course, I knew he wasn't going to do anything. She knew he wasn't going to do anything, but it was clear. I threw his stuff out, told him to get out. And we actually dated she said, I'll never live with him again. I'm like, I understand. I would never put you through that again. That's fine. But we dated for a little while before it became clear he was self-destructing in a way that was so painful. I just basically said, I can't watch you do this anymore. So that's really what it was, is he'd gone from, trustworthy with bouts of crazy town to untrustworthy and totally not reliable, totally doing things that were just not reasonable at all.
Sure.
And so that was that. But it also, sadly, because he was my tech and he was in a crazy moment, he turned off all the servers and I lost 25 years of business.
Oh.
30 seconds, everything was gone. Everything I'd ever written, all my databases, everything, websites, everything, my empire. Poof. And in some ways that might have been even worse. I went to bed for 2 days to decide whether or not I wanted to carry on. I wanted to rebuild. My daughter is old enough, she could have survived without me. I really had a serious 2-day contemplation of, what do I want to do from here? And at the end of 2 days, I was like, I'm badass. I'm getting up and getting back to my life. So that's the turnaround story. I'd like that to be a little bit more dramatic, but it really was.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't even aware of the story, and you had me at, very first sentence. So I've been on the edge of my seat the whole time.
But it goes on. It gets a little crazy in there. He decides, I tell him, don't ever come back to the house if my daughter's by herself. He does. I file a restraining order on him. And the last time I saw him was in a courtroom.
Okay, so let's break this down, because this is like intense on so many levels. And if people, well, first of all, you've raised about 1,000,005 questions in my own head, but I will try to pare it down just a little bit. So being as you work in, the area of healing and overall mental, emotional health, what are some of the signs that people can look for or identify, whether it's in themselves or in someone else, that might indicate some kind of trauma has happened that could potentially affect this person's or your own future relationships and life in general?
Well, first of all, today, almost everybody's nervous system is dysregulated. So it's almost impossible not to have some type of trauma. People think of trauma as things like sexual abuse and or violence, when the reality is not being held as a baby is traumatic. There's so many different things. So what identifies somebody, and so there's degrees, right? So a lot of people disassociate, meaning they don't speak out, they're quiet, they shut down. You try to have a conversation and they shut down and walk away. That's almost as traumatic as somebody yelling at you, depending on your nervous system.
Sure.
So that's the whole thing. It's like, what's a disruptive behavior is when people react instead of respond. Now, you have the emotions you have, you'll never get on top of those, but you can get on top of your behavior. Mm-hmm. So if somebody is well regulated, they're basically like, yeah, that kind of sucks. I don't really like that so much, but they're not like losing their cookies or shutting you out or doing something like drinking, drugs, whatever. And as I say this, you're all just going, well, holy crap, everybody does that. Exactly. Exactly. That's right. 30 years ago, when I was helping coaching people, there was very few people that were as dysregulated as there are today. Pretty much today, in the last 20 years, it's a thing. So violence, anger, a lot of men have rage, that's how they express their helplessness and their hopelessness, and their fear is that anger. And then rage is a step above anger. Rage is where they're totally disassociated, and they're saying and doing things that are totally outside of their control at that point. Because once it goes to that point, there isn't critical thinking anymore. It's just like high arousal, no critical thinking. So reasoning with somebody like that, not cool, because it's not going to work. But I think the thing to understand is that, and I said that specifically, that just because you love somebody doesn't mean that you should be in a relationship with them. And I think that's an important thing to remember. that's
Yeah. So, I mean, what did you do as far as nurturing your own emotional self through this whole thing? Because you really did love and care for this person, and you wanted to see this person heal and get better. I would imagine that you maybe felt some kind of like helpless about his healing, that you couldn't like maybe get him to a point where you guys could stay together, or like, how did you like emotionally handle the fact that you were ending this relationship, that you were leaving this person for whom I would imagine you would want the best?
Yeah, well, just that. Basically, I knew from the moment the first freak out on the couch that we were probably on borrowed time unless something shifted hugely, right? Because having somebody, it was a great story. He said it once. He pulled out a piece of paper and a graph. He pulled out a piece of paper and a board, and he's like, hey, so it's 1% of the time maybe that I freak out. What about all this other great stuff? And I'm like, that's awesome. And that's true in the times of, yes, this is all great and these are all fine. But what happens is every time you freak out, my daughters and I get shorter time frame of worrying about when the next freak out is. So when somebody cycles and you know what their cycle is, the honeymoon period lasts right after the cycle. And this is like addictive behavior is the same type of behavior as what we're talking about here. And so, that cycle where, oh, he didn't do it now, how long before the next one? You start worrying about it way before it even happens, which shifts the entire space between the relationship and the household, right?
Sure. And then
somebody freaks out again, right?
And it sounds like you're just keeping yourself in this chronic state of stress, because you never know, like, well, you do kind of know, but you know it's going to be coming. Absolutely. You just might not know exactly when. And
you can even cycle that. Most people have a cycle. They can keep it together for so long before the energy just blows. And he was coaching, he was doing self-care. I was doing self-care. I mean, to be in a state of that, we were all doing self-care. And when like I said, I probably would have, that last year was like telling me that, I'm just, cannot go on this way. And even though things had been better, it was like clear. So that's why that when he said, I can't leave, and he drew that line that he knew I would kick him out. And then we dated after that, was because maybe apart, he had enough time to handle his stuff. So when we were together, he was in a different space. There's too much pressure, trying to heal, run a business, try to be a stepdad, all of this, too much. So that was like the break, have your own space, do that. What ended it completely for me was calling him up one evening and finding out he was gambling. He had a whole bunch of addictions had just like piled on, right? And I'm like, I realized he's going to have to hit rock bottom really hard, and I can't. I took care of myself and said, I can't watch this, which is ultimately what the end of that was. And so, yes, self-care all the way through, because I knew that was taking an emotional somatic hit on me. Absolutely. And then afterwards, for the next, like, it's been 4 years since that time. And there's been a process of moving and healing throughout that time frame as well.
So it sounds like you had enough kind of self-love and respect to distinguish between loving and caring for him or for someone else versus respecting and loving yourself and what you want for you and your daughter down the line, which
Absolutely.
means that you must have, whether you realized it or not, and I would imagine that you did realize it because of the work that you do, but you had already had some pretty clear boundaries drawn in the sand of like what you would be willing to, at what point, like how far would it be able to go until it was like, nope, I'm out.
Well, absolutely, yeah. So
Sounds like, yeah,
the physical, like there was going to be no physical violence. That
right.
was like, and I was clear that first time when he had that response, and I was like, hey, look, so yes, that was a trigger. Got it, right? I won't wake you up again. Got it. Now that healed. I was eventually able to wake him up with no problem. So there were a lot of changes that were going on, as well as he was partaking in no alcohol, no substances or whatever throughout our relationship as well to stay more even keeled. But it wasn't ever a matter of his response was about me. I mean, that is one thing I knew right from the beginning because of the work I do, that love shouldn't be enough reason for anybody to stay in any type of relationship that has any abuse component. And trust me, getting raged at is abuse. So I'm not saying that's not. So we're all very clear that's emotionally abusive. Compatibility isn't enough reason to stay in that. There's no actual reason to stay in that unless you're somebody who does the work I do and you decide that you're going to take on that project and you 100% understand it's a project, because that is a project. And if you decide you're going to take on that project, you're going to get hurt too. So a lot of people don't do that. They just think, well, I love this person and my love will change them. That's not true. If they're not doing work on their own, they're not getting coaching on their own, they're not getting therapy on their own, they're not actually doing things to help move them forward, they're not going to change because you love them. They're not going to change because they love you. That has nothing to do with any of it.
Sure.
There's nobody, he was the first man I was 100% committed to. I was never going anywhere. I thought it would be there for my life. And he knew that as well. He literally fell on his sword to break us up, and even did the stuff post because he knew I wouldn't tolerate it. He knew what my deal breakers were. And so it's can be romantic in that sense that he threw himself on his sword because he knew he was destroying us both. It's kind of a romantic, tragic, thing that they make movies out of. And yet the reality of where both of us would have been left afterwards is all too real for most people who stay in relationships because of they believe that's their soulmate, or they believe that that's the most love they've had, or they feel helpless or self-worth. I never felt any of that. I mean, I 100% know my self-worth, self-love. None of that was a problem. I mean, I was 48 when I met him, so I'd had a lot of life experience up until then.
Yeah, well, that really helps. I mean, not that just age is something, but typically when you've had more experience, then you have had more time to reflect, more time to know what you want for yourself, don't want for yourself. You get to know your capital S self inside versus like
Right.
your ego self, right?
Right.
And I think that it's probably a lot less people that are in that space, especially if you're starting relationships like younger. And so for you to have a lot of those tools already in your backpack was like probably a huge help throughout that whole thing. And a lot of people I'm sure that you work with are stuck because they just maybe have no idea how to handle it either in themselves or in the other person.
Well, and they probably shouldn't. I mean, the reality is that first freak out should have been the deal breaker for most people. That should have been the deal breaker for them right there. Now, the other part is, how do men heal, or how does anybody heal who has a rage trigger? Because the way you heal, other than going to therapy and stuff, is you have to be in the dynamic of, you can't heal in a vacuum. So you can be totally fine on your own until you get in a relationship that creates those triggers. So for men to heal, or anybody to heal, they also need that space and to do it. So that's the tricky part of that, right? I think another reason that people stay way too long is the whole feeling like sexual compatibility. They don't understand that sexual compatibility or chemistry is about pheromones. And pheromones, if you have a high pheromone attraction to somebody, it bypasses critical thinking as well. Mm-hmm. So you think it's love. It's not, it's pheromones. Pheromones means you can be physically unattracted to them, not like them at all, and still want to have their babies. Because the pheromones don't care about visual attraction. They only care about chemical chemistry that's happening and opposite immune systems. And so a lot of people get trapped in the pheromone trap. The bad boy thing is also about pheromones.
Sure.
You get trapped in the pheromone thing, and then you think, oh my God, I'll never feel this way again. Well, you might not ever feel that way again. But a high
That might
intensity
actually be a good
pheromone, a
thing.
high intensity pheromone relationship doesn't mean compatibility in a long-term relationship either.
I love that you make
So
that distinction for sure.
absolutely, absolutely. So, and I know, like, I remember when we first started this conversation, it was like, we have a time frame for this conversation. I'm thinking, dude, you are like going to be so not wanting that time frame when we get into this. But I do want to honor that here, so I'm bringing it up.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I have been looking at the clock. We do have a little bit of time left, but I appreciate you kind of going into that because I think this is like uncharted territory for a lot of people. And I know, and you keep mentioning men, but in my own experience as well, and with like lots of, female friends, women that I've spoken with, even previous clients of mine, I'm a breakup and relationship coach. What you said about, well, you were talking, now I lost my train of thought completely. You were saying getting back into kind of patterns with women, and I don't want to generalize because I'm sure men can be codependent as well, but having that idea that I don't understand why when I'm on my own, I'm totally fine. But then
Right.
as soon as I start talking to someone or dating someone or get into a relationship, like I just like I go crazy almost, or you
Yeah.
just kind of completely lose it. And so I think that you saying, the healing doesn't happen in a vacuum is so also important because all the stuff that you're learning about yourself when you are giving yourself that space is that then you have to then transform that into practice with the other humans in your life, which is probably one of the most challenging pieces.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. And so you, I suppose, kind of served the role as holding space for him to continue with his healing while you guys were together until it just wasn't okay anymore.
Yeah. 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 Pretty tragic. Yeah. Until I knew that I was done, until basically really he was done. He knew that he was a very self-aware person, very smart, and had studied a lot of things. So I mean, he had a lot of tools, but the pressure cooker of whatever with his dad's death and everything else that was happening, he knew that that wasn't working. And that's good too. It could have been a less horrible breakup, I guess. Maybe that's the only way he could have done it, and I think that's true. And my wish for him after that was basically that he'd get himself together and basically keep using the tools to continue to heal, because I have nothing but, am I going to love him forever? Absolutely. That's my soulmate. So what happens? The whole thing started. What do you
Yes,
do?
that's where I was going to bring us
What do you
back.
do
What do
when
you
you
do
have
after that?
well, what I know is that I believe that, sex and love is in abundance. I've had a lot of it. I can go have a lot of it again. I don't know that I will love that way, but then again, I've loved lots of different ways. So I don't even know that that's important. If I hold that to be nothing, like that is the only thing left or the only thing there, then basically I wouldn't ever move on. And I would just decide that, oh, there's never going to be anything the same. Well, nothing's ever the same. Even with the same person, it's not the same over decades. And so I believe that basically, I will love again, and I will, have a different love that may be epically in a different way. And so, yeah, what do you do after you've had your soulmate? It didn't work. You have a kick-ass life. And then, you go on and you do more cool things, and you acknowledge the fact that for now, since I don't know, I call him the love of my life, but since I'm not dead yet, I don't know that that's actually accurate. Well, I don't know that I'll ever find that compatibility again. I don't know that it's important to find that compatibility again. I know that it's important to go, where am I today? What do I want to do right now? And not close down or feel, I've never been jaded in love. Love is abundant. Love is out there. Why just say it's only for one person, one time, one way, is a way to keep ourselves closed and small. So just like if he had died, the way that I can honor our story is that I didn't die, that I've survived. that not only did I survive, but I'm thriving. And in fact, I just turned 60 and I'm moving into the best. I feel just so badass and awesome that, yeah, who knows what's up next.
That's amazing. I love that. And I really like that you highlighted that there are all different kinds of love. And what I find people, or I hear people saying, and even what I've thought in my past is like, oh, well, what if I never find that again? Or what if well, you may not. Like if
Right.
we're talking honestly, you may not. And frankly, maybe you should not, because if it happened at a certain time in your life, then you're probably meant to learn something very specific from it. And so I would hope that that same thing might not repeat itself again in the future, because that might mean you didn't really learn what you were supposed to.
Well, just the chaos. I mean, the chaos theory is alive and well. If you just look to nature, you'll know right now that there's never anything that's the same.
Right.
We're not the same. Things aren't the same. My quality of love, he taught me to love beyond what I was ever capable of loving. My love is different now. How I would nurture somebody, my deal breakers, everything about me is different coming out of that too. So, what if he shows up is the question that people always ask. What if he comes back around? We have to see what was going on then.
Oh, Tanya, you just left me on the edge of my seat again. Well, those are all of these stories and ideas you've presented with us today are so intriguing. I can't wait to talk to you more about it at another time. Would you like to share where people can find you, or any projects that you're working on if they were grabbed by this conversation as well?
Absolutely. If you Google Tanja, Tanja Diamond, you will find me at least 7 pages of Google. I'm around. I'm easy to find. I'm on Facebook in the same name as well. And currently, I'm working on a TEDx talk about how our ancient wellness practices are actually hurting our current nervous systems. So stay tuned for that.
Oh, interesting. I'm sure that we all definitely want to tune in on that. So I will make sure that people can get connected with you in the description of our interview. So thank you so much for joining us today, Tanya. I really appreciate your time.
Loved it. Had fun. It's always too short, but hey.
All right, you guys, if you really enjoyed this, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel, and be sure to share with anybody else who you think this would benefit, and stay tuned because we've got some great episodes coming up in the future as well. See you next time.